Hi guys, welcome to the session. This is all about ad fraud and how it is impacting lives and what people are doing to overcome ad fraud. I was reading Adobe estimates that 28% of web traffic is a fraud and it comes from automated bots and stuff like that. And just to make it easy for everyone to understand, what happens is when a bot traffic comes in, it's actually a traffic that is not being served to a potential customer, or it's not coming from a potential customer. It's coming from an automated program. And that means a lot of money that you're spending has been wasted. So, Prathamesh, for somebody like Licious, who's into this business of digital first and pushing everything that you're doing from digital, how does how do you filter out what happens from the bot traffic, and how does it impact all that Licious does?
Hey, hi Naresh. So I think this is a big problem, especially when all of us sitting here are managing budgets in crores for at a monthly level for each of us. Now, when you said about 28% coming through traffic, obviously there are server side issues, server side problems, server side costs, but the biggest pain point is not able to segregate between the real customer as well as the bot customer. So we have actually put certain guardrails there, and these guardrails actually we have done it with the help of our MMP platform, as well as we have taken some guidance from mFilterIt to understand what are those checks and balances that should be put. Obviously, and as we proceed during the webinar, we will be talking about it. But the importance of having a clean traffic goes without saying. Because what you're essentially saying is, like right now, whenever all of us have worked on the investor deck, what it essentially does is take certain set of customers from the organic cohort or your paid cohort. Suddenly, your paid CAC looks higher, your organic customers look lower. What it says about your brand actually says कि organic customer कम आ रहे हैं या फिर paid CAC higher है. So it has much bigger ripple effects with rather than the just 20-25% traffic that is coming from the bots actually.
So, if that is the issue, then Ritesh, is there something that can be done, or things are happening where you can start to control what is coming from bots, or at least you know that this is a bot traffic that is coming in? Is there a way to filter it out or do something about it?
Yes, look, there are things that one can do about this at an enterprise level, at an app level that you can do. But I think the bigger problem with the whole bot piece is that there are two aspects around it: the sentiment analysis that it does, and then also the open-ended queries which are around there. So therefore, what happens around these is that once the bots are arranged around natural language processing, therefore, at a very smaller level for a help desk kind of a query, that helps a lot. But then if you start to layer in more details over it, and therefore, basically, if you're not creating your bots with the end objective from an end customer perspective in mind, then there are a lot of gaps that will start to show up. I'll use an example, like from a supermarket perspective. If if you were to use a bot to identify between 20,000 products, then you will probably need to go through 20 million images to come back with the identification of a product. But then the bot may not be able to differentiate between a cereal box versus a box of nuts, because of the differentiation which is there. So such kind of problems would arise because bots are based primarily on feeding of data, and then they are trained on that. So that's where the gap comes in, and then obviously the privacy risk around it. I mean, imagine that same example of a supermarket. If you were to say that you got presented with a wrong product at a supermarket, that does not have any implication. But imagine that if you put in that environment in your healthcare or medical services, so that would have issues there. So open-ended queries, to answer your question, Naresh, is the key, where one needs to minimize the risk, and that's key for the developers to focus on.
So clearly there is some solution that needs to be found from the tech side. There are open-ended queries that you can look at. Obviously, sentiment analysis can make you look and see that this traffic is coming from a source which is non-human source, but some of it is actually post what has happened. Now, if I come to you, Arvind, and you run a very different kind of business and run a very different kind of brand. How does it impact you when you're looking at traffic and start to feel that the ads that you are serving are not being served to people they should be served to?
Naresh. So it's a significant problem given McDonald's, remit of marketing activities. It impacts both brand marketing and also performance marketing because given our food delivery business, we invest a lot in performance marketing, paid marketing. So this kind of impacts both very significantly, and of course in different ways. In one context, it's largely viewability. And to make sure we are reaching the right audiences. And in other contexts, according to our estimates, about 20-25% of our spends before using the tools were possibly wasted, because of ad fraud and bot-rated ad fraud. So with the introduction of many tools, we have been able to reduce and redirect the spends to better use, but yes, it's a significant issue, and it can't be all the processes can't be automated, right? So it's a lot of manual intervention apart from using sophisticated tools. So there's significant effort needed by a brand marketer to remain on top of the subject.
If I can come back to Licious and look at how you go about doing the same thing, because again, in your case, it's the same thing. You would be putting a lot of money on brand building because you're a new brand and trying to get into a newer category, and food delivery is not an easy business to be in. But at the other end, you're also looking at a business to come from performance marketing and stuff like that. So how do you go about looking at choosing your channels and then saying that, okay, this is what we should be doing or this is what we should not be doing? Is there an active toolkit that you have that says that, okay, this is what, if we do these practices, the fraud can be reduced?
Yeah, I think Arvind had a very beautiful point. It's like a eureka moment when he just told there has to be human intervention. Just think, Malav, it's like a Terminator. You're fighting against bots, you're fighting against machines there. Till the time you don't put that human touch into that, you won't have an upper edge. Malav, if you think about it, like he said about a few manual interventions, eventually, if it's a completely automated system, a bot or some coder on the other side will be able to figure that out, logic. So to give you an example, we were working with multiple affiliates. With one of the affiliates, I told them we want these many clicks. Okay, they had a certain number of click to install ratio, install to registration ratio, registration to conversion ratio. I said, this 2 weeks, I'm going to pay you in clicks. You won't believe, he optimized it for clicks and I got my clicks. But aage ka pura funnel kharab ho gaya. Now, when Arvind said that was the time that constant manual intervention needs to be done, where you actually keep on tweaking things. So that was the first part. Now, coming to your question, Naresh, when you said about performance marketing, so actually what we have done now internally, we have actually more than 25 filters that we have put in. Now, these filters actually go right from the impression that we get it from a primary and a secondary publisher level, right to the order that is placed. Now, you won't believe, like we started paying them on the order, like whenever there's a successful order. These guys actually modified it so that today a customer is placing an order, within the next 12 hours it is getting rejected. It is getting rejected due to any reason that they've created. So then we actually moved one step further, that it has to be validated. Post that, even I know, Malab, in my previous company, I come from Rummy Circle, where affiliate payouts are the highest amongst whoever we are sitting. It's much more than higher than that. There, they actually went to the LTV calculations as well. So if you look at the entire funnel, right from be it click-through rates, click to install ratio, click to install time, install to registration, install to conversion ratio, you have all these benchmarks for your clean traffic. You know, when you were not running marketing, you know how much time does a customer take to convert. You know how many clicks that a customer takes to convert. You know how the scenarios vary. Put those benchmarks, keep on varying that, and just keep on modifying. And I think these are things that affiliates or bots cannot replicate. But there will be something. There will be some click injection, click spamming that is going to happen. And that is something probably that is where the manual intervention will come into picture.
So I'll come to Amit now. And Amit, I think you run a very, very different kind of setup and stuff like that. So, and there is also a question that has come in, which is how much money have people being able to save using your tools and technologies. And while they're talking of manual intervention and looking at manual things and seeing orders being cleaned up, how do you help the brands and the affiliates and the marketers to do this in a better way?
All right, I'll just thanks. I think it's a good perspective from both the advertisers and even from my counterpart from Norton. From that standpoint, so essentially, fraud is an unimaginable number. I mean, whatever, there's no one can put a number to it. And the second way is there is no fixed solution also. Wherever we go and say, okay, this is something what we do, I think there's no guarantee that this is something what you can say. From an India context, anything between 20-25% across all mediums, though there is a definite an issue of ad fraud. 20-25% is a number what I can safely say. And I think there is a perception there is fraud in affiliates, third-party networks or direct networks, but unfortunately, ad fraud as a topic is possibly just scraping the surface. It's there in all mediums. So now we work with, we are validating installs from Google, Facebook, programmatic, DV360, and so on and so forth. And Arvind gave a good point that we are talking about post-attribution, but the enough buying happens at the impression levels. Enough buying happen at the media level, and then lap it up with a story of brand safety and infringement to top it up. The situation becomes extremely, extremely difficult to manage from an advertiser point of view. And from a platform provider which is our primary business in terms of protecting brand spends, we need to look at different layers. I completely agree with Arvind's point of view that there has to be a combination of technology, process, and a manual intervention, and intertwining of data between what a marketer is doing and what the backend is doing. Sometimes even there are issues around that. So safely 20-25% is definitely subjected to bots. And just to go and top it up further, you're just looking at the marketing funnel. How about organic funnel? Even at the organic level, there would be issues of bad actors coming in. It could be abusers, or it could be even competition, which might need to steal or put some perspective. And I'll give you one of the examples from a telecom operator in India. They saw a competitor bot coming in to choke their call centers. Pure call centers in terms of doing calls and so on and so forth. So virtually, it's not a problem. 2 points. It's not a problem on only affiliates. It's across all medium. That's the education what we are trying to give to the industry. And that's something what we're talking to government and at a national level at Niti Aayog and other policy levels. Second element is it is not a problem only on marketing. It's a problem on brand. It's about on compliance. It's a problem on organic data and the down the funnel elements, whether it is account takeover, whether it is transaction validation, even what is I'll call even in a banking sector, I even call to a standpoint of now video KYC is open. Now the moment you have video KYC, it's a very big problem for the banker to validate, am I the right guy? I have a photo, I can do all kinds of things, but there's a second level of validation which is done. So every business would be impacted around these areas, and there has to be a defense mechanism, and no single person can solve this. It has to be a collaborative, cohesive method to do that. Yeah, that's a point of view of mine.
So interesting. Now, if I come to Ritesh and you run back to technology piece and stuff like that, and I understand attribution data, I understand how much of money is being put at the lower end of funnel and stuff like that. 2 questions. One, how does Norton see it? Is there something coming which will help the brands solve this issue, or are you working on something? And 2, what happens to the cost of manual intervention that brands are putting in? Is there a way that you can ease that pain off for the brands? And is there a way in which that manual intervention can be reduced? Now, and I say this with a very interesting story. This happened years ago when SBI cards and we used to work with, this is I think 2000, where one newspaper put a call center so that they could call the number given in the ad. And the brand used to feel that that is the newspaper that is perfect for the brand because you're getting so many calls. None converted because they were all calls coming from a call center that they had set up, which I think is the earlier example of how bots could actually gamify mainline advertising. So if I can come back to you and see, is there a tech solution that can come up? Is there a cost solution that's involved in it?
Oh, definitely. So tech solutions would come up. And look, I think I agree with what Amit mentioned. We are just scraping the top layer here. There is a lot more to it, and it's just going to get complicated. I mean, just like we have seen other technologies make it more difficult over the period of time. I mean, data breaches would come into this, which will add to more headache for organizations at some point. But specifically to your question, so we at Norton are obviously working on some of this. So we actually launched a tool for Twitter specifically. It's called Bot Site. So it's available all browsers, and basically it's working towards identifying your fake tweets which are there. So therefore it can call out and say that this tweet is actually not a genuine tweet. It's not by a genuine person, but in fact it's by a bot. So there are technologies which are coming through the funnel, and it will continue to go through it as a process. So the expansion would happen over a period of time. My worry around this whole bot piece is, and I think what PD has as well mentioned earlier, that the social, the human intervention. You see, at some point, organizations would start to create bots which are, social bots, where they are designed from a human understanding perspective. So therefore, they will continue to improve their technologies around that. So therefore, that will be placed from a perspective of trying to reduce the human intervention from a good cause perspective. So yes, so your human intervention would come down. You would get the bots to be trained to understand the human psyche more, and therefore present the solution there. But then that will again, require its own set of challenges to be dealt with. That how do you keep all that data sensitive, and maybe technologies like erasing the sensitive pieces of information just as when the job is done, and you don't take it back into your server. So things like that would have to be dealt with.
Cool. So now you mentioned something interesting, that you now have a tech solution which looks at Twitter and filters out stuff that is coming in from people who are really not on Twitter and who are bots. I'll come back to Prathamesh, and you actually would be spending a lot of money trying to find the influencers on social media. I'm presuming that there is a lot of money that goes into identifying the right kind of people so that you speak with them, and there is a whole field that you create for the brand. I think the bots impact the social media influencer piece far more than they impact what happens on a website and what happens on a website traffic that is coming in, or how they impact performance marketing. Is there something that you're doing on that front, discovering new things, filtering things out? How does that work for you there?
So I think this part about influencer marketing, we have just started this pretty recently, I think, so the way it actually goes from is performance, brand, and influencers actually come under brand piece, if I were to say. Uh, and the measurements actually, while Ritesh also mentioned, the measurements come on the engagement side, on the impressions, on the likes, shares. And definitely, I believe that's a huge impact that it will do, because all our measurements on influencers are not on the bottom funnel metrics that we say. These are the orders that I got from an influencer. They're based on engagement metrics. And with the rise of these bots, actually, it will impact, because our payouts and everything depends on influencer. When I sort which influencer, I look at the followers, I look at the cost per engagement, and then I decide. Uh, so I think that is a huge problem, and I'll actually put it out here because we haven't yet been able to solve it. How do I actually filter? Like Naresh, you asked, actually we haven't been able to solve it, and I believe there is a huge ripple effect, much beyond. As a brand, we are a smaller brand, and we know how there are a lot of political issues which have happened because of a lot of tweets, a lot of retweeting which happens by somebody else, some bots. Recently, we saw the chief minister of Jharkhand, I believe, when he actually called out something. So, but these bots can actually create bigger controversies. But right now, I think I'll put this question to probably Amit or Ritesh. How, for a brand, these are problems which probably a social media platform, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter should be solving, or probably smaller, new emerging Indian brands like probably a Chingari or somebody who are just emerging. In fact, I think recently I had read some report by some marketer itself, where he had put some plank videos, and in one of these short video apps, he was starting getting some 10,000 views, 15,000 views, and I was quite surprised with it, and because if you see on TikTok before it got banned, every person was showing millions of views, and people were really getting that kick out of it. So I think I'll want to know how we can actually solve it. And that's a problem even I have. I'll be candid here.
So I hold that thought because I'll go to Arvind, and I'm sure it's the same battle that you have. When you look at an influencer piece and you look at the numbers that come to you, whichever tool you may run it, whichever discovery that you may go through, I'm sure all of us, when we get traffic on our handles, and we are not, I'm not saying, I really haven't looked at your handles. I'm assuming none of you are paid influencers. And, and so that's just an assumption that I'm going by. You guys are either brand owners or tech owners. But how do you go about filtering this entire bit that happens? Now, like the case of Badshah, that singer who went on to become the most viewed singer in India and stuff like that, at some stage he came out to say that no, he actually bought the traffic from bot, and I think Kyuki was involved in that, and there was a big media house involved with that. There was a big entertainment company that was involved in making that happen. So how do you go about? Is that a problem that you face, or you've decided to live with what happens on a social media platform?
So right now we haven't yet got that big कि मैं इतने सारे million followers वाले influencers के साथ काम करूँ. I haven't yet started. But I think this is a problem that will come to us probably in the next 3 to 6 months. I think it will come to us. So that's why we haven't yet focused on that as much.
Arvind, is that the issue with you and when you are looking at your plans?
Yes, this is a significant issue. And in our category, Instagram is very important, right? And this problem is rife in all platforms, including Instagram. And so we have got into a rhythm with our partners where, as a part of maintenance, we remove a lot of these so-called inactive accounts, and there is a way to, or a playbook to kind of find those accounts. But like I said, it's manual. So you kind of make sure you weed those inactive accounts out on a regular basis, because they just amp up so-called engagement without any real value being added to the brand. So that's one kind of intervention, if I might call it, on Instagram and such platforms. The second, also, if you look at this issue in a more broader sense, you have humans interacting bot-like, right? So there are, like you mentioned, influencer programs, right, which are quite rampant, and there are set templates that are just used to magnify a message. And I think the marketing community themselves have got to blame for themselves to blame for it. They tend to use these engagement platforms as broadcast platforms, and do a shortcut about it. So how to get into best practices, how to make sure when we're working with partners, we are telling them this is the way. This is the playbook to be done. There are no shortcuts to engagement, for example, right? And just making sure, because many a time there are these humans, bot-like humans, which kind of get onto a subject and make it bigger than it is actually is, right? And brands sometimes, come under fire because of those, let's say, those social conversational issues. So again, social listening is something very important, where you kind of find out issue at the moment it's becoming bigger. So we are able to intervene and find out whether it's a real issue or it's an issue being magnified, right, by bots, by you mentioned some examples of competition, stuff like that. So that's it. And then, of course, the third part is there are really interesting tools out there. It's an evolving space. I think Amit and Ritesh talked about that. We happen to use a lot of Amit's tools, and they have given us a lot of ROI in terms of reducing the wastage in our spends. But then, bots are also getting smarter, and I guess brands are just, coping up with that, with the challenge today.
So let me come to Amit now. We've discussed too much of what is happening and what brands are going through and challenges that they face. But looking at you and the fact that what's the next thing that is coming into this? Are there bigger challenges coming, or eventually tech will start to catch up and start to reduce the menace of bots that is happening? Is there something that is happening? Is there something that is there in the arsenal which we can start to use?
Definitely. I mean, I don't see that there's definitely an issue with the walled garden approach and I think the walled garden is increasing from an India context. I'll just give you 2 data points. Now, the standard walled garden approach from a brand was that there's Google, there is Facebook, there's Insta, there is Snapchat, and it's a self-attributing network. Now, from an India standpoint, about 65% of the media spends happen across these platforms. And now there's two significant shifts happening. 15%, typically 16% is going down to e-commerce advertisements, which is the bigger ones are Amazon, Flipkart, and then big baskets and grocers and others would also come. And FMCG is pretty active on this. And I'm sure Prathamesh would definitely have a media plan there. Second element is the whole OTT framework, because there's a lot of emphasis on OTT with shift from a TV viewing standpoint. So technically what's happening is there is enough and more happening on the walled garden approaches, and there has to be some tools and methodologies to protect that. So one key element is looking at counterfeits on these brands. Second element is piracy. There's a lot of elements happening on the piracy side on the OTT. Or for example, the second element what is coming is on the account credentials being stolen. And our credentials, your credentials, Licious credentials, McDonald's credentials. There is enough happening on the dark web, deep web, elements where there is elements of protection which is required. So bots, account takeovers, brand infringement, brand safety is quite interweaved, and unfortunately it is not looking from the same lens. Now, straight away, I'm sure the marketeers will say that for account credential stealing is my IT and the security guys are actually working on it. But there is a lot of media element which also needs to be protected and converted. That where are you taking traffic from? What are you trying to do? How is it being redirected onto it? And if the moment you find credentials, which could also be a marketing flavor because you're spending media and the media creatives are being used to create a gullible traffic. So all those elements needs to be looked into totality, not at a very silo-based approach. Sorry to complicate this topic because there are different elements around it. So from a bot detection, standard bot detection, whether it is pre-bid, whether it is post-bid, possible. Brand safety, brand filters across all walled garden, non-walled gardens, possible. Third, which is very important element which is coming now, advertisers and publishers, like for example, are merging. At one point of time, let's take an OTT. At one point of time, they will act like an advertiser, and the second time they act like a publisher, and then they will come to McDonald's and say, or Licious to say, "You please, I know where is the TV viewing happen. Please give me the traffic." At the same time, they are also acquiring traffic. Now and the second element I'm sure you would have seen, like Badshah example you said he spent money in buying it, but imagine the advertisers and brand would have actually paid on those impressions also as a matter of fact. So they were funding it in a way. And who's gaining all this? The walled gardens are gaining. So essentially it's a very interesting mix. And fourth element what is coming in is the fact, now you would have seen Airtel coming out say my network is fraud free. Z coming out to say I have done self-regulation of the OTT content. Now it becomes extremely complicated for a media manager or a media planner, and I have both Arvind and Prathamesh would have sleepless nights now. Where am I spending? What do I do? What metrics is something what I need to buy out? So this becomes slightly more complicated, and there has to be the correct actors, correct players. The ecosystem needs to come together, and as an industry, we need to have the right set of questions, and the vetting process would definitely bound to increase. It would come under a regulatory ambit. It would come under audit angles. So I mean, we all as a consortium needs to be open for these dialogues. No single individual can solve it, but yes, there are definite tools which is really evolved. And just on a closing comment from my side, pre-attribution possible. Don't get the bad elements onto your attribution platforms, whether it is web or app. Please spend some time on how can you make your environment brand safe, not on the media element, but also from a standpoint of where is your brand being represented, And third, it's not a marketing only issue. You got to marketing and product needs to work in tandem. It cannot be said कि यार मैंने तो attribute कर दिया, but I don't know what's happening at the back end. People will take advantage. The fraudsters are much more smarter than all of us in the call here. So they have means and mechanisms to block it. And fourth, from a regulatory angle, I mean, the walled garden needs to have a right matrix. They can't live in the paradigm that I will not give anything. I am the best one. So there has to be a push that side also. And I think government, the Niti Aayog and others are actually trying to build some frameworks around it. That's the approach, what I would say. That's the path forward.
So Ritesh, coming back again, now from a future perspective, and there is a lot that has been spoken about in terms of what the walled garden approaches are and how government are trying to build a system around it so that we can go beyond it and stuff like that. What's in the arsenal of Norton? What is it that brands can look forward to or publishers can look forward to ensure that this menace is controlled?
Look, generally, so there has to be a basic hygiene from the brand's perspective first, because if there are brands who would want to buy, because like Prathamesh mentioned, right, if there's a singer or an entity or a company which wants to buy views and likes and all those influencers, then obviously you are fueling it. So that's one conscious decision that brands would have to take. I think Amit has covered everything very well in the 4 points that he called out. I think one thing which is already reality, which is happening now, is bot-driven attacks. There has already been a news that there was a big grocery app which was breached earlier in November. And because of that, there are now 4 million complaints which have been believed by a reporter, a bug bounty reporter has come back and said that, there are about 4 million records out there where these people used a common password between a large marketplace operator and that grocery app. And now because those passwords are common, they are seeing a lot of cases come in where account takeovers are happening or people are ordering on your behalf. So bot-driven attacks would be something that the brand would have to be very careful about, like now itself. The whole customer experience is one other thing, that, the frustrations that can be created for a customer is one other thing which also that the brand would have to take care of, because ultimately that would affect your revenues as an organization. Amit also mentioned about policies. I think like GDPR, for example, the European GDPR is already talking about privacy policies specifically to bots. And that's where I think a lot of work needs to be done. Like Amit mentioned, you see, fundamentally, there are 2 points around bot, and it goes against the whole concept itself, because bots are based collectively on large amount of data, which is contrary to the principle of data minimization and the purpose limitation. You see, the bots is completely converse of what those 2 points are. And that's really, if you look at the government, that's where they have been saying that, where is my data going? I want data residency in India, and all those things. So basically the bots by nature are just against it. So therefore, the faster we act on it and look at it, the better control and hang we would have over it.
So clearly there is the data issue that is there. If I can come to you, Arvind, data is one thing, but the security of data, is that something that gives sleepless nights to brands? Because they know when you're doing the commerce, when you're sitting with that enormous amount of data that you are sitting in, is there a whole feeling that you can come under attack some way and you need to be prepared for it? And is that connected to ad fraud?
Yes, Naresh, it's a reality. Just today morning, I got a message, I think it was from Air India, saying that there has been a data loss from their perspective, and I could be one of the affected parties, right? Now it shakes my confidence in that brand, right? And immediately you scramble and do what you can, etc. So it's all about brand trust in that sense. And in this digital world, so many customers have used the McDelivery app, for example, to order their favorite burgers, and it's an asset which we have to protect at all costs, right? And the cost of protection is going up significantly year after year. So it's a big agenda for us, data protection, and we like every other large brand, we try and do the best that we can to secure ourselves from that. Because end of the day, data is the new oil, as is often said. But yeah, I mean, for us, it's more about brand trust than anything else. So yes, data security is very important. And I know Amit mentioned how there are various sellers of impressions, right? And some of them are dubious, right? So some of them are credible. So when you get into that space, it's not a search for impressions, right? It's search for credible impressions. And a lot of work has to be needed. A lot of savviness is needed by the media teams, etc., to make sure that we're taking the right decisions. We are not just buying impressions for impression's sake. They are credible impressions, and we are not increasing the problem for the industry, but taking steps to control the problem. But as an industry, Naresh, we are far from, I would say, we're just catching up, right? The consciousness of this topic is, in the general, quite low. But I'm happy to see a lot of fora picking up this topic, raising the consciousness among marketeers, who are then investing behind these tools and techniques to kind of keep a pace. More needs to be done in this.
And again, PD, there is data, there is security, there is fear. Is there something you want the platform owners to do something about it? Now, we have heard this quite often, that the platform owners sometimes are hand in glove because it works for them. Like it was being mentioned that when Badshah was buying that bot traffic, brands were buying into him. So there was a lot of money that was being exchanged and was being exchanged for fraud traffic, knowing that the traffic might be fraud. Is there something that you want the platform owners to do and then change this entire paradigm?
I think the buck stops with us, the media buyers, actually here. What are we chasing? What are the metrics that we are chasing? If we are chasing those 10 million views, 100 million views, we'll keep on chasing that. And a lot of my counterparts everywhere, I think we are a bunch of smart individuals. We can actually see through. इतना तो तजुर्बा आ गया कि ये सच है, ये झूठा ट्रैफिक है, वो थोड़ा एक्सपीरियंस आ जाता है. And I think if we are honest with ourselves, we'll know where to put the checks and balances. It's not a rocket science, very honestly. Obviously, like Arvind said, yes, they are catching up. And I think it's, from a media buying perspective, if we stop, वो बोलते हैं ना, जैसे WWF had done this, if the buying stops, the killing will also stop. In that way, like if we stop buying a certain platform, we know if there's fraudulent traffic, eventually that has to stop. So I would actually say it comes back to us, the whole marketing community that is sitting here on this forum. We can do that, and I think platforms, they will keep evolving, bots will keep evolving. If we stop buying the wrong inventory, things will automatically stop.
Arvind, do you agree that the call lies more in hands of advertisers and less in the hands of platform owners?
I would say both. Amit mentioned how the walled gardens, somehow tend to benefit from all of this, right? In the end, or rather, let me put it this way: they are not impacted. They are impacted the least from all of this. But that will not work, right? So tools and technologies, independent tools and technologies, one part of the whole thing. Then this media platforms, what they are doing. It's like, Naresh, a new definition of a view happens every few years or every 6 months, right? We have to then, what was a view 2 years back? What is a view now, right? I mean, how do we grapple with that issue, right? And then some platforms are much more forthcoming in terms of brand safety, and some platforms are less forthcoming and very rigid about, how transparent they are on brand safety. And then there are brands, some brands who, impressions for impression's sake versus credible impressions. So all of them have to come together, and there are various industry bodies working towards this. All of them have to come together to make sense of the situation. Otherwise, the only winners are, let's say these bots, for example, or the people behind these bots, and brands are, like you said, 20%, 15%, whatever the estimates are. It's just wastage of a lot of money. So there has to be a credible industry solution to all of this.
I think on that, Arvind, do you think, like just thinking, the mobile attribution platforms who sit at the center? So, for example, there will be 2, 3, 4 big mobile attribution platforms, and they have a view of at least 30, 50 different mobile apps. And they understand, for example, if I say this secondary publisher that is sending fraudulent traffic to me, there's a possibility that there's another brand who is using the same mobile attribution platform. Like you spoke about an industry body. Do you think that mobile attribution platform can do that? Or if it takes that step,
So definitely, it's a step in the right direction. Regard to, let's say, paid marketing campaigns, lead generation. So definitely, I think there are some solutions out there, and those are very helpful. But also there are video platforms out there, large engagement platforms out there, who are not very transparent on their metrics, right? So it's a huge challenge for being a global brand. We are engaging with them globally, and we get advisories on ABC platforms, and we can really see that some platforms are progressive while some platforms are not. So that creates a lot of complexities for marketers, where to spend and how much to spend.
Right.
Anything you want to add to this on this, Amit? Because clearly there is regulatory, and you've spoken about regulatory things and stuff like that. Clearly there is a regulation missing on this, because everyone seems to be doing what they feel like doing. And it's not really driven from what the marketers want. It's driven from what we feel we should be telling you. Now on television, for instance, Bark and the way the Bark ratings are, and the whole mess that it went through, and at the end of it, all news channels are suffering today because all they stopped was measurement for news channels. Similarly here, is there something that the policymakers need to look at, change, do something?
I want to make 2 points on this. Future looking from a policy standpoint or regulation, there's definitely a need of a strong body or an accreditation kind of an element, which is pretty active in US standpoint, but then that is also at times abused because of various reasons like BARC. So we should go into a direction where there's a consortium where there is some bit of transparency and understanding of data and some benchmarks which can be collated together. Prathamesh mentioned about attribution platforms, possible, a good source from an app industry. Second source would be from a web industry. There would be a lot of platforms, a lot of data, but of course under a suitable measurement matrix can be done. But the other element also which comes by this consortium is a conflict of interest would always be there. I think this conflict cannot be avoided. I cannot say that I don't have a conflict. I have a conflict in a way that I'm working in a space of ad fraud detection. Hence, if the problem is there, I will be able to solve it. Whereas from an attribution platform, unfortunately, attribution models has two broad problems. One problem is they are primarily measured on paid media. They are paid on paid media. So their interest of solving this problem is all minuscule. There is no immediate benefit. And second is, even these attribution platforms buy media campaigns, and there is also intertwined with in terms of buying media. So there is definitely a conflict which needs to be avoided. But coming to a solution, I always call ad fraud like an obesity in the digital ecosystem. We as an individual owner, the owners Arvind and Prathamesh said, where does the onus lie? The guy who's spending the bucks needs to decide. And like obesity, I think we know what are the parameters, what we should do. We should have this dessert is required or not, at what quantity, what elements, at what elements. I say that unless and until, of course, from a future and a direction, we can all do that path. And it's very forthcoming with people like Financial Times, Financial Express picking this up stuff, which is mainstream media. which has not happened so far. Otherwise, it was small trade forums and trade bodies. So if the big media players or the big mainline stream media picks up this subject and topic, it's going in the right direction along with the policy conversation. But until then, the bug will lie on marketeers in creating the right set of people. And Arvind and Prathamesh, we have had quite a lot of conversations, and some other brands whom we know are quite forthcoming in even discussing this upfront. But other half of the marketeers will not even come on mainstream think that there is a problem on fraud. So there is definitely an education required, policy making possible, but it's a long path ahead, and you want the strong players to come in to fight, to navigate that battle. But until then, the onus lies on the people who are spending money, and there is definitely ways and means to protect it. Of course, there would be pitfalls or there would be leakages, but I think some band-aid is okay rather than having nothing. And like obesity, you need to monitor your parameters. And I hope we're all safe and healthy as we go along. That's how I treat this from that standpoint.
So I'll come to Ritesh, and it's the same issue. There is clearly something built by the platforms because it works for them. And as we've been just told, like obesity, it's a very interesting thing to do. Now, if you look at this from that perspective, will the platform owners ever do something to counter this menace? Like you were saying, that even on OTT, it can be abused. In US, the entire industry body can be taken for a ride. Will the platform owners change? Will they invest behind it? Will things happen from that perspective? Or it's the marketers who have to get clever?
No, it will happen. So look, it's a combination of how things would be. So as it's a demand and a supply thing, like Prathamesh mentioned, that's one aspect of it. Policy will be the other aspect of it. And then obviously the platforms. Look, as a technology, generally it's been designed for the purpose of a good. Now, between that good, there will always be a bad. This has happened many a times with everything that has been created. So it's the same with the bot. I mean, the advantages are out there. We have seen it many a times. With the whole pandemic, the whole video KYC has helped certain industries perform better, some work getting done better. So from that perspective, it's the good that it has been created for. The bad elements would come in and they would try to profiteer from it. But then as a combination of policy, the marketeers, the demand and supply going up and down, it will change. It's the whole, I call it, I mean, while Amit mentioned it as a problem of the obesity and how you monitor it as an individual, I say this is the price of capitalism that you pay. So people would want to profiteer from it, and the markets will shift. Today it is bots, tomorrow it would be something else. That's how I see. Platforms will change eventually. It will move on from here and it will go to something else in the future.
So clearly what we are hearing is that the bot guys are cleverer and far more nimble and fast, and they change and adapt much better and much quicker than what the platforms are. And it's an interesting battle that I think we will keep seeing as monies continue to flow more and more into digital media, because that's where most brands are putting in far more money. And so thank you very much for joining us. It's been an interesting discussion. Thank you, Ritesh. Thank you, Amit. Thank you, Arvind. Thank you, Prathamesh. Have a good day.
Thank you, Naresh.
Thank you, Naresh, for having us.
Thank you, Naresh.
Nice meeting you all.